I still remember the sound of my phone vibrating against the kitchen counter that night. Not ringing, not buzzing nonstop. Just one slow vibration, like it didn't want to be noticed, like it carried something heavy, something final. I almost ignored it. I was washing a mug, staring at nothing, thinking about how quiet my apartment felt without family noise, without my mom's voice telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing with my life. I had moved out 3 weeks earlier. Not slammed doors, not a dramatic exit, just a quiet leaving that somehow hurt more than screaming ever could. Then I saw the notification. Voicemail, from Mom. My chest tightened before I even played it. When your own mother calls late at night and doesn't hang up, you feel it, that pressure, that warning inside your body that says something is wrong. I dried my hands slowly, too slowly. I think part of me hoped the message would disappear if I took long enough. It didn't. I hit play. Her voice came through sharp and cold. Not the voice she used when she tucked me in as a kid. Not the voice she used when she laughed too loud at her own jokes. This was a voice I barely recognized. "Don't come back," she said. No hello, no pause. "Don't come back. You made your choice. We're done fixing your messes." Then silence. The message ended like that. No goodbye, no explanation, just a click. I stood there frozen, my hand still hovering over my phone, like if I didn't move, the words might crawl back inside it. "Don't come back." I replayed it, once, twice, 3 times. Each time it hurt differently. First it felt like shock, then disbelief, then something darker, something heavier. I sat down on the floor with my back against the cabinet. I don't remember deciding to sit. My legs just gave up. My name is Lena. I'm 30 years old. And that voicemail shattered something I didn't even know was still holding together. My mom's name is Claire. To the outside world, she's warm, organized, the kind of woman neighbors trust with spare keys and secrets. Inside our house growing up, she was the center of everything. Her moods shaped the air we breathed. My stepfather Mark always said she just wanted what was best for us. My younger brother Ethan learned early to stay quiet, to stay agreeable, to never be the reason her voice changed. I was different. I asked questions. I pushed back. I wanted space. And to my mom, that felt like betrayal. 3 weeks earlier, I had packed my things after another fight that started small and exploded fast. It was about money. It was always about money. I had refused to give her access to my savings again. I said I needed boundaries. She laughed when I said that word. Boundaries. "You wouldn't have anything without me," she said. Maybe that's when something broke for good. After the voicemail, I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there listening to the quiet hum of my fridge, the distant sound of traffic, my own breathing too loud in my ears. I typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. What do you even say to "don't come back"? So I didn't respond. I went to bed fully dressed, my phone on my chest, like I was bracing for something. I kept expecting it to ring, an apology, an explanation, anything. Nothing came. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. "Don't come back." The words replayed like a warning siren. Around 4 in the morning, I finally drifted off. My phone woke me up an hour later. Not a voicemail, a missed call, from Mom. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The name Claire felt different now, heavier. Then another vibration, another missed call, then another. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. My phone kept lighting up again and again like it was panicking. By the time I fully focused, there were already 9 missed calls. I didn't answer. I just watched. Messages started coming in. "Call me now. Lena, please. We need to talk." My stomach twisted. Need, not want, not. Sorry, need. I checked the time. 6:12 a.m. Something had changed. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. The sky was pale gray, quiet, calm, like nothing was wrong, like my world wasn't slowly turning upside down. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark, then Ethan. My chest felt tight. This wasn't normal. My family didn't blow up phones unless something serious had happened. something they couldn't control. I scrolled through the call log. 20 missed calls. I hadn't even been awake an hour. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking slightly now. Anger was starting to creep in. Confusion, fear. What happened overnight? What changed between "don't come back" and "please answer"? I finally listened to the new voicemail my mom had left. Her voice was different this time. Rushed, strained, almost shaking. "Lena, please call me back," she said. "We need you. Something's wrong. Please. Need you." I laughed out loud. A short, broken sound that surprised even me. Need me now. I didn't call back. Not yet, because for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. Whatever happened overnight, it wasn't about love. It was about consequences. And for once, I wasn't the one facing them. My phone kept buzzing as the sun came up. By 8 in the morning, there were 46 missed calls. 46. From the people who told me not to come back. From the people who thought I'd always fold. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling something new rise inside me. Not fear, clarity. And deep down I knew this was only the beginning. I didn't answer any of the calls that morning. Not because I didn't care. Not because I wanted to be cruel. But because for the first time I needed to hear my own thoughts without my family's voices drowning them out. By 9 a.m., my phone finally went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that feels like the calm before something breaks. I made coffee and didn't drink it. It sat on the table getting cold while I stared at the wall, replaying the last few years in my head. Moments that didn't feel important back then. Moments that suddenly made sense. Growing up, I was always the problem child. Not because I did bad things, but because I refused to stay silent. If something felt wrong, I said it. If something didn't make sense, I asked why. My mom hated that. Claire liked control, but she called it care. She liked being needed, but she called it love. When I got my first job at 19, she insisted on helping me manage my money. At first, I thought it was normal. Parents help. Parents guide. Then she started making decisions without asking me. "You don't need that. I'll hold on to this for you, trust me." I trusted her longer than I should have. By my mid-20s, I noticed things didn't add up. Money missing. Accounts I didn't remember opening. Bills I didn't recognize. Every time I asked, she had an answer. Always calm. Always confident. "You're just stressed. You don't remember. Let me handle it." Mark backed her up. He always did. He avoided conflict like it was poison. If agreeing with her kept the peace, that's what he did. Ethan stayed quiet, eyes down, pretending not to hear. And I stayed longer than I should have because leaving felt like betrayal. Because I didn't want to be the daughter who broke the family apart. Until the night I did. 3 weeks before the voicemail, I found a letter in the mail addressed to me. Not from a friend, not from work, from a collections office. My hand shook as I opened it. I remember the exact words. Unpaid balance. Final. Notice. I had no idea what they were talking about. I called the number immediately, my voice trembling as I gave them my information. That's when they told me. There were loans in my name, several of them, old, overdue. I hung up and sat on my bed in silence. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I walked into the living room where my mom was folding laundry like nothing in the world was wrong. "What is this?" I asked, holding out the letter. She didn't even look surprised. "Oh, that," she said. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what, Mom?" "That I borrowed a little, just to cover things. You know how tight things have been. Borrowed. In my name, without asking." She acted like I was being dramatic when I raised my voice, like I was ungrateful, like I owed her for raising me. That's when I told her I was moving out, not in a rush, not in anger, just a statement. I can't live like this anymore. She stared at me like I had slapped her. Mark tried to calm things down. Ethan left the room. My mom followed me into my bedroom and closed the door behind her. "You're not ready to be on your own," she said quietly. "You need us." I shook my head. "No, I need honesty." That's when her voice changed. "If you walk out that door, don't expect us to clean up after you anymore." I didn't respond. I packed, and I left. The voicemail 3 weeks later wasn't a surprise. Not really. It was just the moment she finally said out loud what she had been implying for years. "Don't come back." But now, the morning after, with 46 missed calls staring back at me, I knew something had gone wrong for them, badly wrong. Around noon, I finally answered one call. Not my mom's, Ethan's. He sounded breathless, panicked. "Lena," he said, "thank God. You need to call Mom." "What happened?" I asked. He hesitated. "Everything." That one word sent a chill through me. "What do you mean, everything?" He lowered his voice like he was afraid someone could hear him through the phone. "The bank froze the accounts." "Which accounts?" "All of them." My stomach dropped. "They flagged something, fraud or something." Mom's freaking out. "Fraud." The word hung in the air between us. Ethan kept talking, words spilling out faster now. "They came this morning, someone from the bank, then someone else. They're asking questions. Mom says it's a misunderstanding, but she keeps calling you." "Why me?" "Because it's your name, Lena." There it was. The truth they'd been dancing around. It's all in my name. I closed my eyes. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. Ethan didn't answer right away. Mark might lose the house. That was the moment my anger fully woke up. Not sharp, not explosive, cold, steady. I thanked Ethan and hung up. My hands were shaking now, but my mind was clear. They didn't need me. They needed me to fix what they broke, again. My phone rang immediately after. "Mom," again. I let it ring, watched the screen light up, then fade. Another voicemail appeared. This time her voice was different again. No anger, no coldness, desperation. "Lena, please, they're saying things. You need to come explain. You know how this looks. You can fix this. You can fix this." Those words echoed in my head. For years, I had been fixing things I didn't break. Smoothing over lies, covering gaps, taking blame, giving more than I had. And every time I did, the line moved further. I sat down and listened to all the voicemails I had ignored. Each one sounded more frantic than the last. "Call me now. This is serious. Why aren't you answering? Please don't do this to us. Do this to us." Like I was the one who took loans. Like I was the one who lied. Like I was the one who said don't come back. Something shifted inside me that afternoon. A quiet decision. Not revenge, not yet, but resolve. I wasn't going to rush over and save them. Not this time. If they wanted me involved, it would be on my terms. For the first time in my life, I let the silence do the talking. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth was finally catching up to the silence didn't last long. It never does when people start losing control. By evening, my doorbell rang. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't told my family my exact address, just the area. That was on purpose. Boundaries only work if you protect them. The bell rang again, longer this time. I stood slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Mark. My stepfather stood there with his shoulders slumped, eyes tired, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. I didn't open the door right away. The bell rang a third time. Softer. "Lena," he said through the door, "I know you're in there. Please. Please." That word felt strange coming from him. Mark was the quiet one. The one who avoided confrontation. The one who let my mom lead every conversation, every decision, every excuse. I opened the door just enough to see his face clearly. He looked older. Smaller somehow. "What do you want?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. He didn't sit, just stood in the middle of my small living room, glancing around like he was seeing a foreign place. "You shouldn't have come here," I said. He nodded. "I know. But your mom, she's not okay." I crossed my arms. "Neither am I." He flinched at that. "We're in trouble, Lena. Real trouble." I waited. "The bank thinks your mom committed fraud." I didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, something tightened. "They're saying the loans, the credit cards, the transfers. It all points back to her. And because it's in your name, they want to talk to you." "They already did," I said. "Months ago. They just didn't know it yet." Mark looked down. "She said you knew. She said you agreed." "Of course she did." I felt anger rise, but I kept my voice steady. "You believe that?" He hesitated. I wanted to. That hurt more than if he had said yes. "Ethan came home crying this morning," he continued. "The house feels like it's collapsing. Your mom keeps saying if you just explain, everything will calm down. Explain what, Mark? Explain how my own mother used my identity without asking. He rubbed his face with both hands. She said she was protecting you, that she was helping you build credit. I laughed. A dry sound. By ruining mine. He didn't argue. They froze the house account, he said quietly. The mortgage payment bounced. Utilities too, I can't access my own paycheck. There it was, control. My mom didn't just manage money, she controlled it, all of it, even Mark's. And now that control was gone. What do you want me to do? I asked. He finally looked at me. Eyes red. Talk to them. Tell them you knew. Tell them it was okay. I stared at him. You want me to lie? He didn't answer. I felt something break inside me then. Not loudly. Just a quiet snap. The last thread of guilt holding me there. No, I said. Mark's face fell. Lena, please. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Your mom told me not to come back, I continued. Did she tell you that part? He looked away. That's what I thought. He stood there for a moment longer, like he was hoping I'd change my mind. Then he nodded slowly. I'll tell her you won't help. Tell her whatever you want. He left without another word. After he was gone, I locked the door and leaned against it, my chest tight. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't panicking. I felt strangely calm, because now I knew. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because the truth had reached a point they couldn't talk their way out of. Later that night, I got an email, not from my family, from a lawyer. Subject line, urgent inquiry regarding financial accounts. My hands trembled as I opened it, not from fear, from anticipation. They wanted to schedule a meeting. They wanted my side of the story, my side. For years, there had only been my mom's version, her explanations, her framing. Now someone wanted mine, I replied. The meeting was set for 2 days later. The next morning, my mom showed up. No call, no warning. I opened the door and she pushed past me like she still owned the place. You've been ignoring me, she snapped. I closed the door slowly behind her. You told me not to come back. She waved her hand like that didn't matter. That was emotional. You know I didn't mean it. I stared at her. This close, I could see the cracks, the tension in her jaw, the fear she was trying to hide. You used my name, I said quietly. She crossed her arms. I did what I had to do. You lied to me. I protected you. You stole from me. She flinched. Don't use that word. Why not? That's what it was. Her voice rose. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. There it was, the guilt, the weapon she'd used my whole life. I didn't raise my voice. I'm meeting with a lawyer, Mom. The color drained from her face. You wouldn't dare, watch me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you do this, you'll ruin us. I looked at her and realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. She wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing control. I opened the door. You should go. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. This isn't over, she said. I nodded. I know. And for the first time, I meant it in a way she didn't expect. After my mom left, my apartment felt smaller. Not because she had taken up space, but because her presence lingered. The air felt thick like it always did after one of her storms. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow. I just sat on the couch and stared at the door she'd walked out of, replaying every word, every look, every threat wrapped in concern. This isn't over. She was right. But not in the way she thought. The next 2 days passed slowly, painfully. My phone stayed quiet except for one short text from Ethan. She's not sleeping. She keeps saying you're going to destroy the family. I didn't reply. The lawyer meeting was set for Thursday morning. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was scared, but because my mind kept racing through memories. Moments that now felt like clues I had ignored. Times my mom insisted on handling paperwork. Times she got defensive when I asked questions. Times she said trust me like it was a command, not a request. That morning, I dressed carefully. Not fancy, not casual, just calm, grounded, like I was stepping into my own life for the first time. The office was quiet, neutral. Nothing like my childhood home where emotions filled every corner. The lawyer, a woman named Rachel, listened without interrupting. She didn't rush me, didn't judge me. She just took notes while I spoke. For the first time, I told the whole story out loud. From the first missing dollars to the voicemail that told me not to come back. When I finished, my throat was dry. Rachel leaned back in her chair. "Lena," she said, "this is serious." I nodded. "I know." She folded her hands. "Based on what you've told me and what the bank has already flagged, you are not the one in trouble here." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "But your mother is." The word mother felt strange in that sentence. She continued, "Identity misuse within families is more common than people think. The problem is, it often goes unreported because of guilt." Guilt. That familiar weight pressed against my chest. She looked at me carefully. "If you protect her now, you take the fall later." That sentence hit harder than anything else. Protect her now, take the fall later. That was my entire life summed up in one line. "What happens next?" I asked. She explained the process. Investigations, statements, timelines. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic, just facts. And for the first time, facts were on my side. When I left the office, my phone buzzed. "Mom." I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice wasn't angry this time, it was soft, almost sweet. "Lena, sweetheart, we need to talk. I know you're upset, but we can fix this. Families handle things privately, in the dark, where no one sees the damage." I deleted the voicemail. That afternoon, Mark called again. This time, his voice sounded different. Less pleading, more strained. "The bank sent a notice," he said. "They're escalating." "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he hoped. Ethan texted later, "Mom says if you loved her, you wouldn't do this." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "If she loved me, she wouldn't have done it." There was no reply. That night, I sat alone and felt something unfamiliar settle in. Peace, not happiness, not relief, peace. Because for the first time, I wasn't twisting myself into knots trying to save someone who never protected me. The next morning, the call started again, not frantic, controlled. My mom left a message that chilled me. "If you go through with this, don't expect us to be there for you anymore." I laughed quietly. She still thought she was taking something away from me. She didn't realize I had already survived losing her approval. The following week, the bank officially contacted me. They asked for a formal statement, documents, timelines. Each step felt heavy, but it also felt right. With every form I filled out, a piece of my fear loosened its grip. My mom stopped calling. That scared me more than the calls ever did. Silence from someone like her meant planning. And I was right. One evening, Ethan showed up unannounced. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tense. "She's blaming you," he said quietly. I nodded. "She says you planned this, that you set her up." I almost smiled. That was easier for her than admitting the truth. Ethan sat across from me. I don't know what to believe anymore. I looked at my little brother, really looked at him. The kid who learned to disappear to survive. "You don't have to choose sides," I said, "just choose honesty." He didn't answer. When he left, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money, it was about control. About a woman who couldn't stand losing power over her daughter. And a daughter who finally stopped asking for permission to live. I didn't know how far my mom would go next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't turning back. Not now. Not ever. The first official letter arrived on a Monday morning. Thick envelope, bank logo in the corner. My name printed neatly across the front like it belonged there. My hands didn't shake when I opened it this time. Inside were copies of transactions. Dates, amounts, signatures that weren't mine, patterns that told a story no one could deny anymore. It felt strange seeing my life reduced to paper. Every choice my mom made using my name laid out in black and white. I sat at the table and went through every page slowly. Not because I had to, but because I needed to face it fully. No excuses, no softening the truth. She hadn't taken once or twice, she had taken over years. When I finished, I leaned back and closed my eyes. There was grief there, real grief, not for the money, for the mother I thought I had. My phone buzzed, unknown number, I answered. "Lena," a man's voice said calmly, "this is Daniel from the Financial Review Department. We'd like to ask you a few follow-up questions." We spoke for almost an hour. He was polite, professional, direct. "Did you authorize these accounts?" "No." Did you sign these documents? No. Were you aware these funds were being used? No. Each no felt like a release. When the call ended, he thanked me. Thank you for your honesty, Lena. I know this isn't easy. After that call, something shifted again. The situation was no longer emotional. It was official. That evening, my mom broke her silence. She sent me a long message, not a voicemail, a text, carefully written, calculated. I did everything for you. I sacrificed my life for you. If you let this continue, I will never forgive you. Never forgive you. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went for a walk. The air was cold, sharp, grounding. Every step felt like I was walking further away from the girl who used to beg for her mother's approval. I thought about forgiveness, about how my mom used that word like a weapon, like something she granted or withheld to control people. I realized then that forgiveness didn't mean silence, and love didn't mean self-destruction. When I got home, there was another message, this one from Mark. She's not eating, she's barely talking, please reconsider. I typed a response, erased it, typed again, then finally sent, I'm not punishing her, I'm telling the truth. No reply came. 2 days later, I got another call from Rachel, the lawyer. They've decided to move forward, she said. They believe you are a victim, not a participant. I closed my eyes. Thank you. There will be interviews, possibly court involvement. It won't be quick, I understand. When I hung up, I felt something close to relief, but it was mixed with sadness. Because even now, part of me wished my mom would just admit it, apologize, say she was wrong. That apology never came. Instead, she showed up again. This time, she didn't knock. She pounded. Open this door right now, Lena. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. I could feel their eyes, their curiosity. I opened the door just enough to step outside and close it behind me. She looked wild, hair messy, eyes red, fear and fury tangled together. You're humiliating me, she hissed. You did that yourself. Her hand trembled as she pointed at me. You're enjoying this, I can see it. I shook my head. I'm surviving it. She stepped closer. After everything I gave you, you choose strangers over your own mother. I looked at her and felt a deep sadness. You chose money over your daughter. That was the moment she lost control completely. She slapped the door beside my head, not me, but close enough to make her point. I didn't flinch. If you don't stop this, she said through clenched teeth, you will regret it. I met her gaze. I already did. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. My hands were shaking when I went back inside. Not from fear, from finality. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Ethan called. They're talking about selling the house, he said. Quietly. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, he paused. She keeps saying you ruined her life. I took a deep breath. No, I said softly, she ruined her own. I just stopped covering for her. Ethan didn't respond right away. Then he said something I didn't expect. I wish I had your courage. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time because I realized something important. My mom's power didn't disappear overnight. It disappeared the moment I stopped being afraid of losing her. And whatever came next, I would face it standing. Not as her daughter, but as myself. The investigation moved slower than I expected. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, like water wearing down stone. Weeks passed, then months. During that time, my life settled into something new, quieter, more stable, but underneath it all there was tension, like waiting for a storm you know is coming, even when the sky looks clear. I kept working. I paid my bills. I rebuilt my credit piece by piece. Every small step felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me. My mom stayed quiet. That scared me more than her anger ever did. Then one afternoon, Rachel called again. They've scheduled formal interviews, she said. Your mother will be questioned next week. I felt a tightness in my chest. Will I have to see her? Possibly. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of facing the person who raised me and realizing how little of her I recognized now. The night before the interviews, I barely slept. I kept remembering moments from my childhood. Her brushing my hair, her cheering at school events, the way she hugged me when I was sick. Were those moments real, or were they just part of the control? The next day, I arrived early. The building was cold, sterile, nothing personal about it, no warmth, no family pictures, just facts and questions. I sat in the waiting area, my hands folded in my lap, trying to slow my breathing. Then I saw her. My mom walked in with a man I didn't recognize. Her lawyer, I assumed. She didn't look at me at first. When she finally did, her expression changed. Not anger, hurt. The kind that makes you doubt yourself. For a second, I almost stood up, almost apologized, almost gave in to the reflex she had trained into me for decades. Then I remembered the voicemail. Don't come back. I stayed seated. The interview lasted hours. They asked me everything again. My story didn't change, because the truth doesn't need adjusting. When it was over, I stepped outside and took a deep breath of fresh air. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. I can't believe you did this to me. I didn't respond. A week later, the consequences began. Accounts officially closed. Assets frozen, charges pending. Mark called me that night. They're saying she could lose everything, he said quietly. I sat in silence. She says she only did it because she was scared, because she didn't want to fail. I thought about that. She was scared of losing comfort. I was scared of losing myself. There's a difference. Mark sighed. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't answer, because for once it wasn't my job. The house was sold 2 months later. Ethan moved into a small apartment near his work. He started therapy, something he'd never felt allowed to do before. My mom stopped calling altogether. No messages, no threats, no guilt. Nothing. That hurt more than I expected. Because even after everything, a part of me still hoped she'd reach out. Not to control, not to manipulate, just to say she was sorry. That never happened. One afternoon, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. Your mother moved away, she said casually. Said she needed a fresh start. I nodded politely and walked away. A fresh start. I wondered if she ever thought about the mess she left behind, the trust she shattered, the daughter she lost, or if she just told herself a new story where she was the victim. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. I thought about identity, how it's shaped, how easily it can be taken if you let someone else define it for you. My mom defined me for years. Responsible, obedient, indebted. Now, I was defining myself. Honest, independent, free. It wasn't a loud victory, it was quiet. But it was real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next disaster. I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. Whatever came next, I would meet it without fear. Because the hardest part was already behind me. I had chosen myself. And I wasn't turning back. For a while, life felt almost normal. That was the strangest part. No constant tension in my chest, no checking my phone every few minutes, no bracing myself for the next explosion. Mornings were quiet, evenings were mine. But trauma doesn't leave just because the noise stops. It shows up in small moments, in habits you don't realize you formed, in fears that don't make sense until you trace them back. I noticed it the first time I hesitated before buying something small for myself. Standing in a store, holding a simple item, my mind immediately calculating how someone else might judge it. Do I really need this? What if I'm being irresponsible? My mom's voice still lived there, even when she was gone. So I started doing something new, something uncomfortable. I made choices without explaining them to anyone. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. I painted one wall of my apartment a deep blue just because I liked it. I booked a weekend trip without asking anyone's opinion. I said no to extra work when I was exhausted. Each time, nothing bad happened. The world didn't collapse. Slowly, my body began to understand what my mind already knew. I was safe. Then one afternoon, I got a message I didn't expect. From an unknown number. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. I hear you're doing well. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a statement like she was commenting on the weather. I felt my heart race, not from hope, from instinct. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. Then I stopped. I didn't owe her an update. I didn't owe her reassurance. I didn't owe her access to my life just because she wanted it. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, another message came through. I never meant to hurt you. There it was. Not I hurt you. I never meant to. The almost apology. The kind that shifts responsibility without admitting guilt. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. Every room empty, lights off, doors wide open, no one inside. When I woke up, I understood the dream. There was nothing left there for me. Weeks passed without another message. Then Ethan came to see me. He looked different, lighter, like he wasn't carrying as much weight on his shoulders. I'm moving, he said. Where? Out of state, new job. I smiled. Good. He hesitated. Mom asked about you. I nodded. What did you say? That you're okay, that you're not coming back. He watched my face carefully. Are you? I thought about it. Yes, I said. I am. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. I'm proud of you, he said. That meant more to me than anything my mom could have said. After he left, I sat alone and reflected on how much had changed, not just in my family, in me. I used to believe love meant endurance, that if you stayed long enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, things would get better. Now I knew better. Love without respect isn't love. It's control. And boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. One evening, as I cleaned out old boxes, I found a folder of documents my mom had kept, copies of my records, my information, things she had never needed to hold on to. I shredded every page, not in anger, in release. With each strip of paper, it felt like I was cutting another invisible string. When I finished, I stood there surrounded by scraps and felt something close to joy. I wasn't erasing my past, I was reclaiming my future. Later that night, I checked my phone one last time. No new messages, no missed calls. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel threatening. It felt earned. Because I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't exposing someone. It's becoming unreachable to the person who tried to control you. And in that quiet space they can no longer enter, you finally learn who you are. The quiet after everything was over didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like fog settling after a storm. At first I didn't trust it. Every calm moment felt suspicious, like something bad was waiting just outside my line of sight. I kept expecting my phone to buzz, kept expecting a knock at the door, kept expecting my mom's voice to cut through my peace and remind me that nothing ever really ends. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing happened. That's when the weight of it all finally hit me, not the fear, the exhaustion. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd spent my entire life anticipating her reactions, measuring my words, planning my moves around her moods, bracing myself for guilt before it even arrived. Without that constant pressure, my body didn't know what to do. Some mornings I woke up already tired, not physically, emotionally, like my nervous system was finally processing years of tension it had been forced to ignore. I cried over small things, commercials, songs, random memories that came out of nowhere. Not because I missed her, but because I was grieving the version of a mother I never actually had. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't always show up when you expect it. It waits until you're safe. One afternoon while cleaning my apartment, I found an old photo tucked inside a book. Me at 8 years old, smiling wide, my mom's arm wrapped tightly around my shoulders. For a moment, my chest ached. She looks happy, I thought. I look happy. Then another thought followed. But was I allowed to be? I sat on the floor holding that picture, remembering how often my happiness came with conditions. How praise always had strings attached. How love was never just love. It was a transaction. Be good, be grateful, be loyal. Don't question, don't leave, don't embarrass me. I placed the photo back inside the book and closed it gently. I didn't throw it away. Some things can be acknowledged without being honored. Around that time, I started therapy. Not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand why it had taken me so long to walk away. My therapist asked me questions no one ever had. What did you want? What did you need? When did you first feel responsible for your mother's emotions? Those questions cracked something open. I talked about being a child and feeling like I had to be the strong one, the reasonable one, the one who didn't make things harder. I talked about the guilt that followed me everywhere, how even now part of me felt like I'd abandoned her. My therapist nodded. "That's not guilt," she said. "That's conditioning." That word stuck with me. Conditioning. Like I'd been trained to respond a certain way, to feel certain things even when they didn't belong to me. Once I saw it that way, things became clearer. My mom didn't just misuse my identity financially. She had been using my emotional identity my entire life. My loyalty, my empathy, my fear of being the bad daughter. She built her stability on my silence, and when I broke that silence, everything collapsed. One evening, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, an old family friend. Someone who used to come over for dinners when I was growing up. She looked at me with surprise. "You seem lighter," she said. I smiled politely. "Lighter how? Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." I almost laughed. If only she knew. We talked briefly, exchanged updates. Then she said something that stayed with me. "Your mom always worried you'd leave her." I froze. "What?" She nodded. "She used to say it all the time, that you were too independent, too strong, that one day you'd realize you didn't need her." I felt something twist inside me. She was afraid, not of losing money, of losing control, of losing the version of me that stayed. Suddenly so much made sense. The tighter she held on, the more desperate she became, the more she crossed lines, the more she convinced herself she was justified. Fear can make people do terrible things, especially when they refuse to face it. That realization didn't excuse her actions, but it freed me from wondering if I was wrong. I wasn't cruel, I was inevitable. As months passed, I began building a life that felt like mine, not reactive, not defensive, intentional. I made new friends, not people who needed me, but people who saw me, who didn't expect me to fix them, who didn't test my loyalty. I learned what healthy connections felt like: calm, mutual, safe. And I learned how uncomfortable that safety was at first. When you grow up in chaos, peace can feel boring, suspicious, unreal. Sometimes I caught myself wanting drama just to feel familiar again. Then I'd stop and choose differently. One night, I got another message from my mom. This one was longer. "I've had time to think. I still believe you misunderstood my intentions, but I hope someday you'll see I did what I thought was best." I read it slowly. There it was again. Intentions, thought, best. Still no ownership, no accountability, no apology. Just another attempt to rewrite the story in a way that didn't require her to change. I didn't respond, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty about that either, because closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from accepting that they are exactly who they've shown you to be. I blocked the number, not out of anger, out of self-respect. Weeks later, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had fueled me when I needed strength, when I needed to stand my ground. But now, it had softened into something else. Clarity. I could see my mom clearly. Not as a monster, not as a villain, but as a deeply flawed person who chose control over connection. And I could see myself clearly too. Not as a victim, as a survivor who stopped sacrificing herself to keep someone else comfortable. One afternoon, while sitting at a cafe, I overheard a woman at the next table talking to her daughter, her voice sharp, dismissive, controlling. I saw the daughter shrink slightly in her chair. My chest tightened. But then I noticed something else. The daughter spoke up, quietly, firmly. "I don't like when you talk to me like that." The mother looked surprised. So did I. Because that moment showed me how change happens. One boundary at a time, one brave sentence, one refusal to accept what hurts. I finished my coffee and left the cafe with a strange sense of hope. Not for my mom. For me, for people like me. People who wake up one day and realize love should never cost you your identity. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. Account balance updated. Everything in order. That simple message felt symbolic. For the first time, my name belonged only to me. My life belonged only to me. That night as I lay in bed, I thought about the voicemail that started it all. "Don't come back." At the time, it felt like rejection. Now it felt like a door closing behind me, not locking me out, freeing me. Because sometimes the moment someone tries to push you away is the exact moment you finally step into yourself. And once you do, there's no going back. Not because you can't, but because you no longer need to. Time did what it always does. It kept moving whether I was ready or not. Seasons changed, days grew shorter, then longer again. The world continued, even after my family as I knew it fell apart. And slowly, almost without noticing, I began to feel like a person again. Not a role, not a problem to be solved. Just me. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I stopped explaining myself in my head. Freedom didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly. One ordinary morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about my mom the day before. Not once. That realization hit me harder than any argument ever had. Not because I hated her, but because she no longer lived rent-free in my mind. I made breakfast, sat by the window, and watched people rush to work. Everyone carrying their own stories, their own hidden battles. For years I had believed my pain made me weak. Now I understood it had made me aware. I began writing again. Something I used to love before my mom decided it wasn't practical. Before she told me dreams were distractions. I wrote at night, pages and pages, not for anyone else, just to hear my own voice without interruption. Some of the words were angry, some sad, some hopeful. All of them were mine. Around that time I got an email from Rachel. The case has been resolved, simple, final, no details, no drama, just closure. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop. That chapter was officially over. Later that day, Ethan called. "I'm settled in," he said. "New place, new job, how do you like it? It feels calm." We both laughed softly. He hesitated. "Mom asked about you again." I paused. "What did you say? That you're doing well, that you're happy?" I smiled. "Thank you." After we hung up, I felt a familiar ache, not sharp, just dull, like an old bruise. Some losses never disappear completely, they just stop bleeding. I thought about how different things could have been if my mom had chosen honesty, humility, accountability. But then I stopped myself. What could have been is a dangerous place to live. What is matters more. One evening I attended a small gathering. Friends, laughter, music playing softly in the background. At one point someone asked about my family. I took a breath. "It's complicated," I said. And that was enough. I didn't owe anyone the whole story. I had learned that privacy is power. Later, as I walked home under streetlights, I thought about revenge. People imagine revenge as something loud, dramatic, public. But real revenge is quiet. It's living well. It's healing. It's breaking cycles. My mom once told me I wouldn't survive without her. That I'd come crawling back. I didn't, and I never will. Not because I'm angry, but because I finally understand my worth. That understanding changed everything. Before bed, I checked my voicemail. Empty. No missed calls. No messages. And instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the strength I didn't know I had. Gratitude for the boundaries I learned to protect. Gratitude for the life I built from the pieces she tried to control. As I turned off the light, one thought settled gently in my mind. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who unknowingly push you toward your freedom. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's walking away and never looking back. That's how my story truly began. Even after everything was resolved, there were days when the past tried to sneak back in. Not loudly, not aggressively, just little whispers that tested how far I'd come. I'd hear someone raise their voice in a store and feel my shoulders tense. I'd get a work email marked urgent and feel a flash of panic like I'd done something wrong. Old habits don't disappear overnight. They fade when you notice them and choose differently. One afternoon at work, my manager asked to speak with me privately. My heart jumped, the old fear rising automatically. What did I do? Then she smiled. "I wanted to tell you how much we appreciate your consistency," she said. "You're reliable, calm under pressure." I nodded, but inside something shifted. Reliable. For so long that word had meant I would carry everyone else's weight, that I'd fix what others broke. Now it meant something else. Strength without sacrifice. After work, I walked home slowly, letting that realization sink in. I was no longer defined by what I endured. I was defined by what I chose. That evening, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, my mom's handwriting. My chest tightened as I held it. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the table and stared at it, feeling the familiar pull of curiosity mixed with dread. What does she want now? After an hour, I opened it. The letter was long, messy, emotional. She wrote about how lonely she felt, how betrayed she felt, how she never expected this from her own daughter. She wrote about sleepless nights, about fear, about regret. But nowhere did she say the words "I'm sorry," not once. Instead, she wrote about how much she missed me, how things could go back to normal if I would just let them. Normal. That word sat heavy on the page. Normal was silence. Normal was control. Normal was me shrinking to keep her comfortable. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't respond. Some messages don't deserve an answer. A few? Days later, I donated clothes I no longer wore. Old notebooks, items tied to a version of me that no longer existed. Letting go became a practice, not a one-time decision, a habit. One night I sat with a friend and told her parts of my story I hadn't shared before. Not the details, just the feeling of growing up responsible for someone else's emotions. She listened quietly. "That must have been exhausting," she said. "It was. But I'm done being tired." She smiled. "I'm glad you chose yourself. So was I." As winter turned into spring, I noticed something else. I was no longer explaining my boundaries to myself. I didn't feel the need to justify them. They just were. That was freedom. One afternoon, while cleaning my email inbox, I found an old draft I had written years ago. A message to my mom I never sent, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need to apologize for surviving. Weeks later, I passed my childhood neighborhood while driving. I almost turned down the street out of habit. Then I didn't. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer mattered. That place no longer defined me. That life no longer called to me. That night, I stood by my window and looked at the city lights. I thought about how far I'd come from the girl who listened to a voicemail telling her not to come back. How lost she felt. How small. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her this: you didn't lose your family. You found yourself. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. Even after everything was resolved, there were days when the past tried to sneak back in. Not loudly, not aggressively, just little whispers that tested how far I'd come. I'd hear someone raise their voice in a store and feel my shoulders tense. I'd get a work email marked urgent and feel a flash of panic like I'd done something wrong. Old habits don't disappear overnight. They fade when you notice them and choose differently. One afternoon at work, my manager asked to speak with me privately. My heart jumped, the old fear rising automatically. What did I do? Then she smiled. "I wanted to tell you how much we appreciate your consistency," she said. "You're reliable, calm under pressure." I nodded, but inside something shifted. Reliable. For so long, that word had meant I would carry everyone else's weight, that I'd fix what others broke. Now it meant something else. Strength without sacrifice. After work, I walked home slowly, letting that realization sink in. I was no longer defined by what I endured. I was defined by what I chose. That evening, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, my mom's handwriting. My chest tightened as I held it. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the table and stared at it, feeling the familiar pull of curiosity mixed with dread. What does she want now? After an hour, I opened it. The letter was long, messy, emotional. She wrote about how lonely she felt, how betrayed she felt, how she never expected this from her own daughter. She wrote about sleepless nights, about fear, about regret. But nowhere did she say the words "I'm sorry," not once. Instead, she wrote about how much she missed me, how things could go back to normal if I would just let them. Normal. That word sat heavy on the page. Normal was silence. Normal was control. Normal was me shrinking to keep her comfortable. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't respond. Some messages don't deserve an answer. A few? Days later, I donated clothes I no longer wore. Old notebooks, items tied to a version of me that no longer existed. Letting go became a practice, not a one-time decision, a habit. One night I sat with a friend and told her parts of my story I hadn't shared before. Not the details, Just the feeling of growing up responsible for someone else's emotions. She listened quietly. That must have been exhausting, she said. It was. But I'm done being tired. She smiled. I'm glad you chose yourself. So was I. As winter turned into spring, I noticed something else. I was no longer explaining my boundaries to myself. I didn't feel the need to justify them. They just were. That was freedom. One afternoon, while cleaning my email inbox, I found an old draft I had written years ago. A message to my mom I never sent, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need to apologize for surviving. Weeks later, I passed my childhood neighborhood while driving. I almost turned down the street out of habit. Then I didn't. Not because it hurt, but because it no longer mattered. That place no longer defined me. That life no longer called to me. That night, I stood by my window and looked at the city lights. I thought about how far I'd come from the girl who listened to a voicemail telling her not to come back. How lost she felt. How small. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her this. You didn't lose your family. You found yourself. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. There was a strange moment that came after all the healing talk, after the therapy breakthroughs, after the quiet victories, when I realized something unexpected. I wasn't just healing from my mother, I was healing from the version of myself that believed pain was normal. That realization didn't come gently. It came the day I almost repeated the same pattern with someone else. It was subtle. That's how these things usually are. I had started seeing someone new, nothing serious at first. Just dinners, conversations, shared silences. He was charming in a quiet way, attentive, thoughtful. And slowly, almost invisibly, I felt that familiar pull. The need to adjust myself, the urge to be easier, more agreeable, less complicated. One night, he made a comment that seemed harmless on the surface. You're really independent, he said. Sometimes it feels like you don't need anyone. My stomach tightened. That sentence could have been lifted straight from my past. I laughed it off in the moment, changed the subject. But later, lying in bed, I replayed it again and again. Why did that make me uncomfortable? Because deep down, I knew what came next. People who are threatened by your independence don't want partnership, they want access. The next time we spoke, he hinted that I didn't share enough, that I was too guarded, that relationships required compromise. My old self would have apologized, explained, softened. This time, I paused. I asked myself a simple question my therapist taught me. Does this feel safe? The answer was no, so I ended it. Not dramatically, not with accusations, just honestly. I don't think we want the same things. He was surprised, maybe even hurt. But I wasn't shaken, because I recognized the pattern before it trapped me again. That moment showed me how far I had come. Healing isn't about never feeling old instincts. It's about not obeying them. After that, I became more intentional about my life. Not in a rigid way, but in a conscious one. I paid attention to how people made me feel, calm or tense, seen or managed, respected or evaluated. And I learned to walk away from what didn't feel right without needing to justify it. That skill alone changed everything. I also started noticing how deeply society reinforces the kind of behavior my mother modeled. How often daughters are praised for being selfless. How often women are rewarded for shrinking. How guilt is disguised as loyalty. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I began speaking up in small ways, correcting people when they assumed things about me, saying no without adding excuses, letting silence exist without rushing to fill it. And slowly, the world adjusted. The people who benefited from my overgiving faded away. The people who respected my boundaries stayed. One afternoon, while volunteering at a community event, I met an older woman who reminded me of my mom in some ways. Confident, commanding, used to being listened to. But there was a difference. She listened too. We talked for a while, and at one point she said something that stayed with me. I spent half my life controlling everything because I was terrified of losing it. I lost more by holding on than I ever would have by letting go. I felt tears sting my eyes. She smiled knowingly. Freedom always looks like abandonment to people who rely on control. That sentence felt like a missing piece clicking into place. My mom didn't experience my independence as growth. She experienced it as loss, and instead of grieving that loss, she tried to prevent it at any cost, even if it meant hurting me. Understanding that allowed me to finally let go of one lingering fantasy, the fantasy that one day she'd wake up and see me clearly. She couldn't, not because I wasn't worthy, but because seeing me would require her to face herself, and she wasn't willing to do that. Once I accepted that, a deep sense of peace followed, not resignation, acceptance. I no longer felt the urge to prove anything to her. I no longer imagined conversations where she apologized. I no longer waited for a version of her that didn't exist. Instead, I focused on building something solid within myself. I created routines that grounded me: morning walks, journaling, meals eaten slowly instead of rushed. I learned to sit with discomfort without panicking, to feel sadness without trying to fix it, to feel joy without waiting for it to be taken away. One night, while writing in my journal, I answered a question my therapist had asked me months earlier. Who are you when no one is watching? The answer surprised me. I am thoughtful, I am curious, I am strong in quiet ways. I am not responsible for other people's emotions. Writing that felt like signing a contract with myself. Around that time, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to since childhood. A cousin on my mother's side. We met for coffee. She hesitated before speaking. I always thought you were brave, she said, even when we were kids. I laughed softly. I didn't feel brave. She shrugged. Bravery usually doesn't feel like bravery from the inside. She told me stories I'd never heard. About how my mom controlled family narratives. How she framed conflicts. How she positioned herself as the victim. Listening to those stories didn't make me angry. It made me feel validated. The problem had never been my sensitivity. It had been the system I grew up in. After that meeting, something else shifted. I stopped wondering if other people believed my version of events, because the truth didn't need witnesses to be real. I started trusting myself fully, and that trust became the foundation for everything else. New goals emerged, not driven by fear, but by desire. I thought about where I wanted to be in 5 years. Not in terms of achievements, but in terms of how I wanted to feel: steady, fulfilled, free. I began taking steps toward work that aligned with my values. Not just what was expected, not just what looked good. And every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself, I have survived worse than uncertainty. I can handle this. Sometimes late at night, memories still surfaced. Her voice, the arguments, the guilt. But they no longer controlled me. They were just echoes, and echoes fade. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different, not physically, softer, stronger, like someone who knew herself. I smiled, and in that smile there was no apology, no fear, just recognition. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, not away from my mother, toward myself. And no matter what the future held, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never abandon myself again. That chapter of my life was closed, not with anger, but with understanding, and the life ahead of me finally felt like it belonged to me alone. There is a moment in long journeys where you stop measuring how far you've come and start trusting where you're going. I didn't realize I'd reached that point until one quiet morning when I was making tea, and suddenly felt no rush to be anywhere else. No urgency, no dread, just presence. For most of my life, stillness felt dangerous. Silence meant something was wrong. Calm was only the pause before an emotional storm. My body had learned to stay alert even when nothing was happening. But that morning, the quiet felt gentle, safe, and that was new. I carried my tea to the window and watched the street wake up. People walking dogs, someone laughing into their phone, a delivery truck double parked like it always did, ordinary life. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged in it, not as someone's extension, not as someone's support system, but as myself. That sense of belonging had been missing my entire childhood. I had a family, but I never felt held. I had a home, but never felt safe. I had love, but it always came with conditions. Once you grow up like that, your sense of identity becomes fragile. You don't ask who am I, you ask who do they need me to be. Breaking free from that question is harder than leaving a house or cutting off contact. It requires unlearning the belief that your value comes from usefulness. That belief ran deep in me. I noticed it when I volunteered too much, when I said yes automatically, when I felt uncomfortable receiving help. It took time to recognize that reflex for what it was. A survival strategy, one that once kept me safe, but no longer served me. So I practiced something radical: receiving. When friends offered help, I accepted. When someone paid me a compliment, I didn't deflect. When I needed rest, I took it without guilt. Each act of receiving felt unnatural at first, almost wrong. But slowly it rewired something inside me. I didn't need to earn care. Care was allowed. One afternoon I was invited to a small dinner gathering. Nothing fancy, just a few people, good food, honest conversation. At one point the topic turned to family. People shared stories, funny ones, difficult ones, complicated ones. When it was my turn, I felt that familiar hesitation rise. The instinct to minimize, to soften, to say it's fine even when it wasn't. But instead, I spoke simply. I don't have much contact with my mother anymore. It was necessary for my well-being. No explanations, no apologies. The table went quiet for a second, then someone nodded. That makes sense. And just like that, the moment passed. No judgment, no interrogation. That was another lesson. People who respect you don't need your pain to be performative. They don't need details to validate your boundaries. They trust that you know your own life. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because my story was accepted, but because I didn't need it to be. Around that time, I began reflecting on the idea of legacy, not in the grand sense, not about money or reputation, but about what gets passed down quietly: patterns, beliefs, habits of love. My mother passed down fear, control, conditional affection. I didn't want to pass those on. Even if I never had children, I wanted my presence in the world to feel different, gentler, more honest. I started mentoring a younger colleague at work. She reminded me of myself, at 22, eager, capable, unsure of her own worth. One day she apologized 3 times during a single conversation. I gently stopped her. You don't need to apologize for having a question. She looked surprised. Really? Really? She smiled, and something in her shoulders relaxed. That moment stayed with me, because I realized how easily these patterns replicate. How quickly self-doubt spreads when it's modeled as normal, and how powerful it is to interrupt it, one sentence at a time. I also began to notice how my relationship with anger changed. For most of my life, anger felt dangerous, explosive, something to suppress or redirect. But now, anger felt informative. It showed me where my values were. It told me when something crossed a line. It wasn't something to fear, it was something to listen to. One night, while journaling, I wrote a list of things I would no longer tolerate. Being spoken to with disrespect, having my boundaries debated, being guilted into compliance, being made responsible for someone else's emotional regulation. Seeing those words on paper felt grounding, like drawing a map. This is where I end, this is where others begin. In the past, I believed boundaries were walls. Now I understood they were doors. I get to decide who comes in and who doesn't. Every once in a while, my mom still crossed my mind. Not sharply, not painfully, just as a presence from another life. I wondered how she was, if she was lonely, if she ever reflected on what happened. Then I reminded myself of something important. Compassion does not require access. I could wish her peace without inviting her back into my life. I could acknowledge her pain without reopening my own wounds. That balance took time to learn, but once I did, it felt like freedom layered on top of freedom. One evening, as I walked through a park near my apartment, I saw a mother and daughter sitting on a bench. The girl was talking excitedly, hands moving, eyes bright. The mother listened, fully present. No interruptions, no corrections, just attention. My chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't grief, it was resolve. That kind of presence is possible. That kind of love exists. And even if I didn't receive it as a child, I could still embody it as an adult, toward myself, toward others. That realization felt like the final piece settling into place. I wasn't just healing from the past, I was becoming someone new. Someone who didn't confuse love with obligation. Someone who didn't mistake guilt for connection. Someone who knew that walking away wasn't failure. It was wisdom. On the anniversary of my move into my apartment, I sat on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes I'd never bothered to sort. Inside them were remnants of old lives, old versions of me. I went through them slowly, kept what mattered, let go of what didn't. When I finished, I closed the last box and pushed it aside. My space felt complete, so did I. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror again, the same face. But different eyes, steadier, clearer. Eyes that no longer searched for approval, only truth. I whispered something to myself then, something I never thought I'd be able to say without hesitation. I trust you, and in that moment I knew. Whatever comes next, I will meet it as someone whole, not as someone trying to earn their place, but as someone who already belongs, to themselves, fully. There is a quiet confidence that comes when you stop waiting for permission to live your life. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It simply settles in, steady and calm, like a deep breath you didn't realize you were holding for years. That confidence found me slowly. It showed up the day I made a decision without checking in with anyone. Not asking for advice. Not bracing for criticism. Just choosing. I accepted a new opportunity at work. One that meant more responsibility, more visibility, and yes, more risk. The old version of me would have hesitated. Worried about failing, worried about disappointing someone, worried about proving my mom right. This time, I trusted myself. The fear was still there, but it no longer drove the car. Taking that step taught me something important. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward without letting fear decide for you. With each new challenge, I felt myself expanding, not in a loud way, but in a grounded one. Like roots growing deeper rather than branches stretching wildly. I stopped rushing my life. I stopped trying to get ahead of some invisible deadline. I allowed things to unfold. And in that space, creativity returned. I started writing again, more intentionally this time, not just journaling but shaping stories, reflections, moments that mattered. Words flowed differently now, less defensive, more honest. Writing became a way to honor what I'd lived through without being trapped by it. I wasn't reliving the pain, I was transforming it. One evening, after sharing a piece with a small group, someone approached me. "Your writing feels grounded," she said, "like you're not trying to prove anything." That comment stayed with me, because she was right. I wasn't writing to be believed anymore. I was writing because I believed myself. That shift changed everything. Around that time, I also began reconnecting with my body, something I didn't realize I'd disconnected from. Growing up, my body learned to stay tense, alert, ready. Now, I taught it something new: rest. I took long walks without headphones. I paid attention to how my feet felt against the ground, how my breath moved in and out of my chest. I noticed how often I'd been holding my jaw tight, my shoulders raised, my stomach clenched. Letting go of that tension felt like learning a new language. My body wasn't a problem to manage. It was a home to return to. One night, during a particularly quiet moment, I reflected on how much of my life had been shaped by reaction. Reacting to my mom's moods, reacting to her expectations, reacting to the fear of being rejected. Now, my life was shaped by intention. What do I want? What do I value? What feels aligned? Those questions guided me gently but firmly. I also began to recognize something else. My mom's voice in my head had faded, but sometimes my own voice still echoed her tone. Harsh, critical, demanding. Healing, I realized, wasn't just about distance from her. It was about kindness toward myself, so I practiced it deliberately. When I made a mistake, I didn't spiral. When I felt tired, I rested. When I needed reassurance, I gave it to myself. That self-compassion was revolutionary. It felt undeserved at first, then unfamiliar, then necessary, and eventually natural. One afternoon, I found myself laughing at a memory from my childhood. Not bitterly, not sadly, fondly. It surprised me, because it meant the memory no longer held power over me. It was just a memory, not a wound. That's when I understood something profound. Healing doesn't erase the past. It changes your relationship with it. You stop living inside it. You stop fighting it. You carry it differently. Lighter, with context, with boundaries. I thought about how much energy I used to spend trying to explain myself, to justify my choices, to make sure everyone understood my reasons. Now, I rarely explained anything, not because I didn't care, but because I trusted my judgment. And people responded to that trust. Conversations felt simpler, cleaner, more respectful. The people who stayed in my life didn't demand access to my pain. They met me where I was. And those who couldn't faded quietly, without drama, without guilt, without regret. One night I sat with a friend who had known me through the hardest parts. We talked about growth, about change, about the strange grief that sometimes accompanies healing. "You're different," she said gently. "In a good way." "How?" "You don't apologize for existing anymore." I smiled. That had taken a long time. I also noticed how my relationship with time changed. I no longer felt like I was behind, or catching up, or racing towards some imagined version of success. I was exactly where I needed to be. And that was enough. Sometimes I wondered what my mom would think if she saw me now. Calm, steady, fulfilled. Then I caught myself. Her opinion no longer mattered. Not because she wasn't important, but because my life wasn't hers to evaluate. That realization brought a deep sense of peace. One morning, I woke up from a dream where I was standing in my childhood home again, but this time, the walls were transparent. I could see clearly. Nothing hidden, nothing looming. When I woke up, I understood the symbolism immediately. Clarity, transparency, truth. Those were now part of my internal world. No more gaslighting, no more confusion, no more second-guessing my reality. I trusted my perceptions, I trusted my feelings, I trusted myself. That trust extended outward too. I trusted that I could handle conflict, that I could survive disappointment, that I could navigate uncertainty. Those things no longer terrified me, because I'd already faced something far worse. Losing a parent emotionally, and surviving it. That experience had strengthened me in ways nothing else could. Not hardened, strengthened, soft but unbreakable. One evening, as the sun set and filled my apartment with golden light, I sat quietly and reflected on the journey. Not with sadness, with gratitude. Gratitude for the moment that forced change. Gratitude for the pain that revealed truth. Gratitude for the courage it took to walk away. And gratitude for the life that waited on the other side. I realized then that my story was no longer about betrayal. It was about becoming someone who chose herself. Someone who honored her limits. Someone who understood that love should feel safe. As I turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, I felt a sense of completeness I had never known before. Not perfection, completeness. I had integrated all the parts of myself. The hurt, the strength, the compassion, the boundaries. They no longer competed. They coexisted. And in that wholeness, there was peace, real peace. The kind that doesn't depend on anyone else's approval, the kind that doesn't disappear when circumstances change, the kind that comes from knowing who you are and standing by it. That was my victory. Quiet, steady, earned, and no one could take it away from me. There is a strange kind of calm that comes at the very end of a long storm. Not the kind where everything is perfect, but the kind where you finally trust that you can handle whatever comes next. That's where I am now. Not triumphant, not bitter, just steady. Sometimes people ask me if I miss her, if I ever think about reaching out, if I wonder what would happen if I did. The truth is, I think about her less and less. Not because she no longer matters, but because she no longer defines me. She was a chapter in my life, not the whole story. And learning to let that be true was the hardest and most important lesson of all. I used to believe love meant endurance, that if you stayed long enough, tried hard enough, sacrificed enough, things would eventually get better. Now I know better. Real love does not demand your silence. It does not require you to disappear. It does not ask you to carry someone else's shame so they don't have to face it. Real love respects boundaries. Real love allows growth. Real love does not punish you for becoming your own person. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it fully. The voicemail that once shattered me no longer hurts when I remember it. Don't come back. Those words used to feel like rejection. Now they feel like a release, because I didn't go back, and in not going back, I moved forward. I built a life where my name belongs to me, where my choices are mine, where my peace is protected. I stopped trying to be understood by someone who refused to listen. I stopped trying to earn love from someone who only gave it conditionally. I stopped abandoning myself to keep someone else comfortable, and in doing that, I found something I didn't even realize I was missing: self-respect. There was no dramatic revenge, no public downfall, no moment where everyone clapped and admitted I was right. The revenge was quieter than that. The revenge was healing. The revenge was breaking the cycle. The revenge was becoming someone who no longer needed validation from the person who hurt her. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not ungrateful for setting boundaries. You are not weak for walking away from something that hurts you. And you are not responsible for fixing someone who refuses to change. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining, stop hoping, stop waiting, and start living. Not out of anger, but out of truth. My story didn't end when my mother told me not to come back. It began. Because the moment I stopped running back to prove my worth was the moment I finally understood it. And that understanding changed everything. This is not a story about betrayal, it's a story about becoming free. And if there is one lesson I carry with me now, it's this: you don't owe anyone your suffering. You owe yourself your life.